This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Parshas Beha'aloscha. We know we have a tradition, we have a Messiah, that there's a certain number of letters in the Sefer Torah. We have a tradition, there's 600,000 oisiyos in the Torah. In fact, the Zayar says in many places, and the Shlach Kadosh brings down, that the word Yisrael stands for Yesh Shishim Riboy Oisiyos La Torah. There's 600,000 letters in the Torah. Now, most people never stopped and actually took out a Sefer Torah, or even a Chumash, and counted them. But if you would find that the number is not precise, to put it the least. Right? The number is approximately 300,000 oisiyos Torah. And one of the first to raise this question is the Pnei Yehoshua Masechta Kedushin. And the Pnei Yehoshua says, this is on Daf Lamed, where the Gemara is telling us that the Rishonim, the early Torah giants, were able to count the numbers, the letters of the Torah. They were called Seifrim. So the Pnei Yehoshua says, once we're on the topic of the letters, right, the Gemara over there says, this letter is the midway point in Psukim, this letter is the midway point in letters. So the Pnei Yehoshua says, while we're on the topic, once we're on the topic that the Tanoim, the Amoraim were called Seifrim, Shayu Seifrim, Kol Oisiyos Shebetorah, that they used to count all the letters in the Torah, Ema Behu Milsa. Let's talk about it a little bit. He says, Dahavakashali Kamashnin. I was bothered for many years. Right? Can you imagine? Pnei Yehoshua, he had a Shvara Tosfos. He spent a day, 2 days, 3 days. He's saying this question he was bothered by for many years. Lefi shematzanu b'sfarim kadmoinim ve'achroinim. We find in the early Sfarim, the later Sfarim, Shem mispar kol ha'oisiyos shebetorah hem shishim riboy. We find how many letters in the Torah? 60 myriad, 600,000. Be'al roimez Yisrael. And this, the name Yisrael alludes to Shenai Trikon Shalai. It's an acronym for Yesh Shishim Riboy Oisiyos La Torah. Right? And that's why we know, in general, conceptually, how many Yidden are there? There's 600,000 Jews, and there's 600,000 Oisiyos. And every Jew has a certain Ois that his neshama is connected to, and that is why people like to get an Aliyah, or people like to look at the Sefer Torah when it's being opened. Perhaps they'll merit to see their Ois, and it will give them a certain chizuk, a certain encouragement. Ulekach mispar kol Yisrael hayu shishim riboy. That is why there's 600,000 Jews. K'ma Yosiyos HaTorah. V'shkol echad miYisrael yesh lo neshama shaloi mitzvah achas. Every Jew has a certain mitzvah, the achiza ba'is achas, a connection to a certain letter. B'davar zeh kemat shu muskam v'nizkar b'zayar. This is not just, something that it says in one sefer. This is acknowledged. This is unanimous. Everybody knows this. Every child knows this. Every grown person knows this. 600,000 letters in the Torah. The Zayar says as Sefer HaKadosh Shnei Luchas Habris b'Mekayim Meisarbe. Says the Pnei Yehoshua, I don't get it. V'amadati mishtoimim. I stand here perplexed. Rabbi, so where does that come from, that expression? V'amadati mishtoimim, it's a pasuk in Daniel. O mispale, I'm in wonderment. L'fi cheshbon chamishim psukim. Pnei Yehoshua said, I don't have the time to sit there and count every letter in the Torah. But let's make an estimated guess. He took 50 psukim. He saw how many letters were in the 50 psukim. And he took that ratio, he multiplied it by the number of 50 psukim groups that are on the Torah. Shiarti belibi shelo yiu oisiyos HaTorah ki im chatzi erech hacheshbon. According to his calculation, you don't have 600,000, you have about half of that. Hamuska, right? You take 50 psukim, you figure out how many letters there are, you figure out how many psukim there are in the Torah, and using that equation, you come to the conclusion, says the Pnei Yehoshua, there are only 300,000 letters. To the point where he says, you know what, I don't even have to count. Ad Sheraisi b'Sefer Chesed Avram. I saw in the Sefer Chesed Avram, Rabbi said, who wrote the Chesed Avram? Rabbi Avram Azulai, the Zayda of the Chida, Sheher Gish Bazeh. The Chesed Avram is bothered by this question. V'kasav she'nimtza de'oisiyos HaTorah hein shloishim v'echad ribai. He counted. There are 301,000 letters in the Torah. What happened to the missing letters? That's what we're going to try to figure out today. What happened to the missing letters? So the Pnei Yehoshua...
Psukim is 6,000, right?
The Psukim is, I don't have the exact sum, the exact figure, but making a calculation based on 50 Psukim, Pnei Yehoshua came out with 300,000 letters. Go look in the back of the Chumash, right? Wonder how many psukim there are in the Chumash? So look in the back of the Chumash. It gives you.
About that, a little more than 300,000.
Look in the back of the Chumash. It tells you how many psukim. Okay, Rabbi say actually, if you want an accurate figure, how many letters there are in the Torah? So none other than Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. You know, he was one who he would actually sit down and count the letters on the Torah, and he came to the following figure. Yaakov Kamenetsky writes at the end of the Sefer Emes Yaakov in number 2, Hine nislavtu ha'achronim. The achronim are bothering themselves, they're troubling themselves. B'cheshbon shishim ribi oishes shebatar, to figure out the 600,000 letters. Shemana hazayar shetamua harbe. Shelafi cheshbon hamasayar shelafanenu eino ela dalet shin alpayim v'tav tav hey. How much is that? 304,805. Look at the Pnei Yeshua. Look at the Svarim of Rav Reuven Margolios. This is a question that Rabbi say all the Achronim are bothered by. How do you reconcile this figure of 600,000 letters with the actual sum total, which is in a little bit excess of 300,000?
What is that? 4,300?
304. 304.
304. I love him.
They're both counted. They come out with different numbers.
Right? I'll let you figure that one out.
One estimated.
You know, we're not proficient to know exactly whether there is a yud, whether there's not a yud, whether there is a vav, whether there's not a vav. So it could be
That's a difference of several thousand.
Yeah. So it'll be hard to explain the discrepancy between Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky and the Chesed Avram. But in any event, certainly to get to 600,000 letters, that's going to be a tough job. And in fact, the Pnei Yeshua gives two answers to this question. Pnei Yeshua, you don't have it on your sheet. First, he wants to answer that, you have 300,000 oisiyos in the Chumash, but what about the Targum? The Targum is also Misinai. So if you add up the oisiyos in the Psukim and the oisiyos in the Targum, you get how many? 600,000. Okay, a little bit of a difficult answer. I saw somebody wanted to ask on the Pnei Yeshua that there's a Arizal in Parshas V'aschanan. The Arizal asks, we know that there's 600,000 Jews, 600,000 letters in the Torah. Every Jew has an achiza, has a connection to a specific letter. How about the Gerim? When someone converts, so now there's 600,001 Jews. Which letter does the Ger have?
No clues.
So the Arizal says, the letters of the Ger are Unclus. The letters of the Gerim are the letters of Unclus. So it comes out that you're going to need to have 600,000 letters, not including Unclus. Unclus is in excess to the 600,000 Jews. The 600,000 Yidden have the 600,000 oisiyos in the Torah. The Gerim have Unclus. So it's a little bit of a difficult answer according to this, that because we see from the Arizal, the letters of the Gerim are the letters of the Targum. Okay. Then the Pnei Yeshua gives another answer. And he says, yes, there are 300,000 letters in the Torah, but we have something called Kri, we have something called Ksiv. Now, there are not that many Kri Ksivs in the Torah. However, every letter is a Kri and a Ksiv. Some of them are both. Some of them are only Kri. Now, I don't believe in the Chumash you have any Ksivs. In Sefer Rus, we just had Rus. You have these letters that appear, and if you never learned Rus before, all of a sudden you see words, and you don't learn them. I don't believe in the Sefer Torah there are any Ksivs. But you have a lot of Kris. You have Kris, right?
Yeah.
So, you do have ksivs, but to have a ksiv v'loy kri b'chlal, I don't believe you have in the Sefer Torah. So the Pnei Yeshua says that the Torah has what we call two bechinos, two levels to it. It has a kedusha of it being written, and it has a kedusha of pronouncing it. That's why there's a mitzvah of writing a Sefer Torah. You have something. The Sefer Torah is nichtav ve'etzva elikim.
In the Torah.
Yeah.
Tishagelna, tishachavna.
Yeah. Okay. You're correct. There, it's a ksiv, but there is a kri for it. What I mean to say that there's no ksiv is, I don't believe you have words that are just written and you don't pronounce anything. Yeah, correct. The classical, you do have a ksiv v'loy kri, but to have just like in Rus, where you have a word and you just ignore it completely and you don't put anything in its place, I don't remember there being any in the Sefer Torah. Okay. So these are two answers in the Pnei Yeshua. Rabbi said we would like to explore a new possibility today. What happened to the missing 300,000 letters of the Torah? Where'd they go? Where are they? Okay. Then you open up the Parsha to the beginning of Beha'aloscha, and you thought we were finished with the Mishkan, right? You thought, okay, Truma, Tetzaveh, Vayaka, Pekudei. No, shoo, Baruch Hashem, that's behind me. I don't have to look back at all those calculations and all those minute details. And all of a sudden, in the middle of Sefer Bamidbar, in the middle of nowhere, the Torah introduces what? The menorah. What's the menorah got to do with anything? What does it have to do with the price of tea in China? All of a sudden, we bring in the menorah, right? Beginning of the Parsha, Vayidaber Shem Moshe Lemar, Daber al Aaron v'Yamratel Beha'aloscha haneros el mo pnei menorah yiru shivas haneros. So you say, oh, Rashi's bothered by that kasha. Rashi explains that Aaron was bothered that he didn't have a share in the various karbanos that were brought during the inauguration of the Mishkan. So Hashem said, no, don't worry, yours is greater than theirs. Okay, but still, we don't have to know how the menorah is made. That is not relevant information now. That should be in Parshas Truma. I have to know the menorah is ad Yurecha, ad Pircha, Mikshahi, Kamara. We're not dealing with the construction of the Mishkan in Parshas Beha'aloscha. You want to console Aaron. You want to make him feel good. So Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe Lemar, Daber al Aaron Beha'aloscha haneros. Finished. Now all of a sudden we need details on how to build the menorah. Zeh Maisa HaMenorah. That's for Parshas Truma. And in fact, if you make the calculations of the different, flowers and buttons and bulbs, some of the details are not given in Parshas Truma. Some of them you have to come on to Ad Yurecha, Ad Pircha, Mikshahi. So why is the Torah giving you in Parshas Beha'aloscha some details about the construction of the menorah? Mashmit Eitzah Hasin. What does that have to do with anything? Okay, that's number 3. Ma inyan shivas haneros lekan. Okay, if I were to ask you, how many Sfarim of Chumash do we have? Most people would say 5, right? Chamisha Chumshei Torah. Chamisha Chumshei Torah. Some of you would even say 6.
7.
But there's something very interesting. The Gemara tells us in Masechta Shabbos, we have in the middle of the Parsha the Inyan of Vayihi v'Nsayah Ha'aron. Yeah.
Nun.
You have in Parak Yud Pasuk Lamed Hey, the end of Parak Yud, Vayihi v'Nsayah Ha'aron Vayimra Moshe Kuma Hashem Yafutz Oivecha, and everybody knows. Right? These 2 psukim are surrounded by upside down nuns. First of all, why the letter nun? Why the letter nun? What's wrong with an aleph? You have something against an aleph. So you say aleph, Gemara starts with beis, daf beis. So use a beis. What are we doing? Nun. Nun, we don't even like a nun. Right? Which pasuk in Ashrei starts with nun? None. Right? None. And all of a sudden, where did it go? Maybe that's where it is. It went to Vayihi v'Nsayah. I mean, why do we pick the letter nun? And why is it upside down? Right? It should be right side up. As far as I know, most letters in the Sefer Torah are right side up. Why? All of a sudden, Vayihi v'Nsayah, it's surrounded by nuns, and they're upside down. Okay. So the Gemara in Shabbos tells us, Daf Kuf Tes Vav Amud Beis, Tan Rabbanon, Vayihi v'Nsayah ha'aron, Vayomer Moshe, Parsha zu asalai HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Simniyos Melmalo Lamata. This Parsha, the Rebbeinu Shalom made simanim, signs, before and after. Why? To teach you it's out of order. It's out of place. It doesn't belong here. Where does it belong? So Rashi explains that what is Vayihi v'Nsayah talking about? It's talking about the traveling of the Aron. So if you look in Bamidbar Parak Beis, it talked about how Klal Yisrael traveled. It says first Shevet Yehuda, and then Shevet Ruvain, and then the Mishkan, which included the Aron. So in Bamidbar Parak Beis, you know what it should say? Vayihi v'Nsayah ha'aron. First Yehuda, then Ruvain, and then the Aron. What's it doing in the middle of Beha'aloscha? So it's out of order. So therefore, Hashem tells Moshe, take 2 nuns, surround these 2 psukim with the nun so that everybody realizes it's out of order, it belongs 8 prakim earlier. Rabbi say, why the letter nun? So Rabbeinu Bechaya says, how many parshios is it out of order? It's 50 parshios out of order. When we say parshia, we mean psuchos and stumais. It's 50 parshios out of order, so really it should be 50 parshios earlier. By the way, if you count it, really it's only 49, and the Mefarshim explain how do you reconcile the extra parsha. You look in the Mincha Shai, the Mincha Shai has 1 extra parsha that we don't have. That might be an explanation. But in any event, the Gemara is telling us, Parshas Vayhi ben Saya is out of order. Why is it out of order? The Gemara says further, lahafsik bein paranios leparanios, to interrupt between two different punishments. One is the punishment of the Messianim. One, it's machlokes Rashi and Tosfos. Some say it interrupts between the fact that Klal Yisrael ran away from Har Sinai, Ketina, Kabrech, and Beis HaSefer. But in any event, that's not what we're going to discuss today. The Tanna Kama says Vayhi ben Saya is out of order to differentiate, to separate between one punishment and another punishment. Rabbi says, Loimin Hashem. No, that's not the reason why you have upside down nuns in the Sefer Torah. You know why? Says Rabbi, I feel it's not out of order. Because in Bamidbar it spoke about how they should travel. But in Beha'aloscha it's speaking about how they actually did travel. So why is it out of order? It's put right over here by the very first time the Bnei Yisrael actually traveled. So really it's in the right place. So why do we have these two extra nuns? Ela mibnei shesefer chashuv hu bifnei atzmai. It's because Vayihi ben Saya ha'arayin is what? A separate sefer. It's a separate sefer. These two psukim are not a separate parak. They're not a separate parsha. They're a separate sefer. So you hear this? According to Rabbi, you ask Rabbi, how many Sfarim are in the Chumash? Oh, you have Bereshis, you have Shemais, you have Vayikra, you have Bamidbar until Vayhi ben Saya, you have the two psukim of Vayhi ben Saya, you have Bamidbar after Vayhi ben Saya, and you have Devarim. So if Rabbi would walk in the Beis Medrash, what would we do? First we would all stand up, we would all shake his hand, we would ask for a bracha, and we'd ask, how many Parshas in the Torah? Rabbi would say 7. Rabbi may rename this book. Yeah? Shiva, I don't know what. Shiva Shavui Torah. So you say, yeah, but we don't go like Rabbi, right? Not so fast. We're going to see. Who do we paskin like? Do we paskin that this is just out of order? Or do we paskin it's a separate sefer? We paskin halacha lamaisa, it's a separate sefer. And we'll see it makes halachic nafkaminas. Take a look, the Gemara even concludes. Says the Gemara, Keman Azla, who does the following drasha go like? Had Amar Shmuel bar Nachman, Amar Rabbi Yonasan. There's a pasuk in Mishlei that says Chatzva Amudei Hashiva. The pasuk says Hashem carved out 7 pillars. Elu Shiva Sifrei Torah. This refers to the 7 books in the Torah. Keman, who does this go like? Not like the Tanakh Rabbi. So Rabbi understands that when it says in Mishlei Chatzva Amudei Hashiva, there's 7 books. Perfect. Bereshis, Shemais, Vayikra. The beginning of Bamidbar, 2 psukim in Bamidbar, the end of Bamidbar, and Devarim. How do we paskin? So you say, what do you mean, how do we paskin? What's an nafkamina? So take a look in Shulchan Aruch, in Arachayim Siman Shin Lamed Daled. Shulchan Aruch is telling us, halacha l'maisa. If chas v'shalom lo yaleinu, there's a fire, and you want to know what are you allowed to save on Shabbos, says the halacha, kol kisvei ha-kodesh matzilin ha'idna mipnei hadaleka. All scriptures, all holy books, we save nowadays from a fire. Even ksuvim that are written in any language. And then the Shulchan Aruch concludes, the end, the 2 lines in the end, Bechein sefer Torah sheyesh by lelake pehei oisiyos mitoch tevoi shalemos. What do? If you say, Oivei, in the Aron, there's a Sefer Torah, oh, don't worry about it. It's mostly rubbed out. The Sefer Torah is 250 years old. The letters are rubbed out. Then you realize, no, it has 85 letters that are still intact. And these 85 letters are from whole words. Says the Shulchan Aruch, Im yesh boi lelake pehei oisiyos mitachteva shleimos matzila noisa. You're allowed to save it. A Sefer Torah that has 85 letters from whole words, you save it. What's the significance of 85 letters? Says the Mishnah Berurah, Sivkatan Lamed Vav, Shal Yidei Shir Zeh. If the Sefer Torah has 85 letters, Yeshadayin Oleha Ktsas Kedusha Sefer Torah. The Sefer Torah still has a semblance of Kedusha. Where does this number come from? That if it has 85 letters, it has Kedusha HaSefer, Shekein Nimtza Beparshas Vayihi ben Saya. The 2 psukim of Vayihi ben Saya have 85 letters. And the Gemara tells us Vayihi ben Saya consists of Sefer B'fnei Atzma. So we see in order to have Kedushas HaSefer, how many letters do you need? 85 letters. So halacha l'maisa, the Shulchan Aruch, in the machlokes between the Chachamim and Rebbe regarding why Vayihi ben Saya is in this place with the nuns. Shulchan Aruch, Maran Bet Yosef, Paskins what? Like Rebbe. that Vayhi B'Nsai is not out of order. It's a sefer b'fnei atzma, and from there we extrapolate that any sefer that has 85 letters, you save from a fire.
Why does the Mishnah Berurah say the Parshas Vayhi B'Nsai, not the sefer Vayhi B'Nsai?
Okay, good ha'ara, but l'chara what he means is that
Maybe it's enough even if it's just a Parsha.
maybe it's enough even if it's a parsha. Okay, but still and what he's saying that really the halacha that would not necessarily be indicative that the halacha is like Rabbi. Maybe even the Chachamim agree, even though it's not a sefer, but it's at least a parsha. It's at least a parsha. Okay, it's a good ha'ara. I have to think about that. Okay, let's see. Maybe we could bring more evidence to what we're saying, that the halacha seems to be that it's a sefer b'fnei atzma. Okay, let's see in the Mishnah in Masechta Yadayim. The Mishnah in Masechta Yadayim says, Sefer shenimchak v'nishtayir bo shmonim v'chamesh osiyos. A sefer that's erased, and you're left with 85 letters. Ke Parshas Vayhi B'Nsai Ha'aron. Like the Parsha, here also the Mishnah says, like the Parsha of Vayhi B'Nsai Ha'aron, Metameis hayadayim, it renders the hands impure. It renders the hands impure. Second. Perhaps we do have parshas that are smaller than Vayhi B'Nsai. You have suchas and sumas that are smaller. So if that's the case, we should learn out that you should be able to save even if it's less oisiyos. Why are we going to Vayhi B'Nsai? Because it's even a sefer. I mean, if you look at Berchas Kayanim is each pasuk is there's a samach. Okay, maybe. Okay. In any event, the Mishnah says like this: we know that if a person touches Kisvei HaKodesh, it's metameis hayadayim. It renders the hands impure. Right? It's an interesting thing. You touch a Sefer Torah, you touch a Megillah, it makes your hands tamei. In fact, there's a halacha. According to some, if you touch a Megillah in the middle of a Suda, you may have to wash until Sidayim over. Because touching Kisvei HaKodesh makes your hands impure. Why is that? It's a gzeira, right? The Gemara in Shabbos says they used to store the Kisvei HaKodesh together with Truma. After all, Truma is holy, Kisvei HaKodesh is holy. They used to store it together. And then the mice would come along, eat up the Truma, and then bite through the Kisvei HaKodesh. So Chazal made a decree that Kisvei HaKodesh render the hands impure. How do we define Kisvei HaKodesh? What's the definition of Kisvei HaKodesh? What if you have a sefer that most of it is rubbed out? So the Mishnah says in Masechta Yadayim, in Parak Gimel Mishnah Hey, Sefer shenimchak v'nishtayir boi shmoinim v'chamesh oisiyos. A sefer that's erased and it's left with 85 letters. Ke Parshas Vayhi B'Nsai Ha'aron metameis hayadayim. It renders the hands impure. Why? It's only 85 letters. Imagine you have the whole Sefer Bereshis, and all you have are 3 psukim that are intact, and the rest of it is completely wiped out. So we would say, maybe it doesn't have kedusha. So halacha is, says the Mishnah, halacha l'maisa, it will render your hands impure if it has 85 letters. Why? Like Vayhi B'Nsai Ha'aron. Like we're saying that we conclude that Vayhi B'Nsai Ha'aron is Sefer B'fnei Atzmai. Take a look in the Baal HaTurim. Baal HaTurim points out that you have these 2 psukim, Vayhi B'Nsai Ha'aron, and Pasuk Lamed Hey, and then Pasuk Lamed Vav, Uvenucha Yomer. So the Baal points out that Vayhi B'Nsai Ha'aron has 12 words, and the pasuk of Venucha Yomer has 7 words. What's the significance of that? Says about Vayhi B'Nsai has 12 words, like the last pasuk in the Torah. Right? Right? You can take a look at the end of the Zois HaBracha. The last pasuk in the Torah has 12 words. And Uvenuchai, the second pasuk has 7 words. Keneged, the first pasuk of Bereshis, to show Loimar Shehu Chashuv Sefer Torah B'fnei Atzmai, to show that it's a separate sefer by itself. And then the Baal HaTurim points out what we've already learned, that these psukim have 85 letters. Why? To teach this halacha that any parsha that has 85 letters, you're matzilin b'fnei hadleika. And then, amazing, what's the next pasuk? Vayhi ha'am k'mesainanim, v'ativar bam eish Hashem, Says the Balaturim, this is a remez, that the 85 psukim will protect you from an eish. In other words, if there's a fire, and you have to save a sefer, if it has 85 oisiyos, you'll save it from mibnei ha'eish. That's pasuk aleph. That's the remez of pasuk aleph. V'ativ arbam eish Hashem. The remez is that if you have the number of oisiyos, communion the oisiyos in mahibin sa'aroin, then you'll save it mibnei hadaleka. Then he says a very interesting thing. We know that someone who has a milah saves a person midina shel gehenim, from the fires of Gehenim. Armavinu comes and schleps you out. And milah has the numerical value of 85. So we see there's something special that somehow the number 85 is matzel mibnei hadaleka. Okay, wonderful. Now listen to this. Rav Meir Arik, in his Hagoyis on the Yerushalmi, he wants to say like this. If we conclude that Vayi ben Sayah is a sefer b'fnei atzmai, so it comes out, there are 3 svarim in Bamidbar. You have Bamidbar before Vayi ben Sayah, you have the 2 psukim Vayi ben Sayah, and you have Bamidbar after. Now there are certain types of mistakes in the Sefer Torah that they would render that sefer unfit to use, but you could still read from a different sefer. Okay, exactly what type of mistake that is, we're not going to discuss right now. But there is a certain level of error that if you find it in one sefer, the next sefer is still good. Says Rav Meir Arik, now that we conclude that Vayi ben Sayah is a sefer b'fnei atzmai, if you find a mistake in the beginning of Bamidbar, no problem. You could still lane Vayi ben Sayah. You could still lane after Vayi ben Sayah. If you find a mistake in Vayi ben Sayah, before, after, it's still good. Why? Says Rav Meir Arik, because we conclude Sefer Vayi ben Sayah is a Sefer b'fnei atzmai. There are 7 books in the Chumash. Bereshis, Shemais, Vayikra, Bamidbar is 3, and then Devarim. Look what he writes. Vagois Tal Torah, Yerushalmi, and Megillah, Ratzel Chadesh, Chidesh Gadol Halacha. Dim Yeh Atos b'Chumash Bamidbar b'Sefer Torah, Aval Atos Tia be'Echem Ne'agimel Som Shal Bamidbar. Then Yeh Mutter Likroi b'Makom Ha'acher will be permitted to read elsewhere in the Sefer Torah. Very interesting. Says Imre Yemes, also amazing. We once spoke this out, Sukkah's time. The Gemara Masechta Sukkah tells us that the Yetzer Hara has how many names?
7.
7 names. Right? Ra. Hashem called the Yetzer Hara Ra. Moshe called him Arel. Tameh, Sinei, Michshal, Evan, Tzefaini. The Yetzer Hara has 7 names, which the Chida explains in his Hakdama to the Simchas Haregal. The second Simchas Haregal. That why 7 names? Each name, the Yetzer Hara has a different kayach. And we know Barasi, Yetzer Hara, Barasi, Taira, Tavlin. So there's 7 types of illnesses of the Yetzer Hara. So you need 7 types of medication. What are they? Bereshis, Shemais, Vayikra, Bamidbar before Vayi ben Sayah, Vayi ben Sayah, Bamidbar after, and Devarim. So it comes out beautiful that the 7 Chumashim of the Torah correspond to the 7 names of the Yetzer Hara, Barasi Yetzer Hara, Barasi Taira Tavlin. So you'll ask, what? There's 7 books in the Chumash? How come I never heard this? That would come out that if there's 7 books in the Chumash, how many books are there in Tanakh? 26. But we always know, Chaf Dalet Sfarim, right? Even Rashi brings down in Kisisa, Ma'akala Mekushetes b'Chaf Dalet Kishutin, Av Tamar Chacham Tzarech Liyos Baki b'Chaf Dalet Sfarim. So you say, of course there are 24. The Rashash has a Tzarech Iyon Lamaisa, why there are only 24 books in Tanakh? Why there are only 5 Chumashim? Ask the Rashash in Masechta Shabbos, that according to this Gemara, Shehu Sefer La'atzmai, and says Rashash, this is how we paskin. V'chein pasak harambam in Yadayim. Upasku hapoiskim kerebi. Utmiani dim kain yiyah chav vav svarim hakdoshim. According to this, there should be 26 books in Tanakh. Uv'chamakim amrin and chav dalet svarim. Or v'chamaduchti, in many places we say there are only 24. Chamisha chumshei Torah chumashim, we say there are 5ths. Where does this come from? It shouldn't be 5ths. It should be 7ths. Okay? So the Rashash is really asking our question that we're not going to be giving an answer to, but it's something to think about. That why do we say there are 5 books? In what way are there 5 books in the Chumash if according to Rebbe, we paskin, there's 7 Svarim in the Chumash? Okay. Rabbi say one last word about the number 85. if you have a Chumash in front of you, I'll show you one last thing. This is in Vayikra Perek Yud. You have a Chumash. This is mamish amazing. In Vayikra Perek Yud, Pasuk Aleph. Okay, it says Vayikchu b'nei Aroy Nadav Avihu Ishmach Tasa Vayinu Vahen Eish Vayasimu Lek Ketayras Vayakrilu Lefnei Hashem Eish Zara Shaloi Tziva Oisam. Okay, interesting pasuk. What was happening in this pasuk? So Nadav and Avihu were bringing their Ketayras that Hashem did not command them. The pasuk before says Vatetzei Eish. The pasuk after begins Vatetzei Eish. Says Imrei Emes, amazing. This pasuk has 85 letters to teach that the number 85 is Matzil Mepnei HaDaleka, Mepnei HaEsh. You have Eish before, you have Eish after. Just like the Baal Turim said, Mila is Matzil Medina Shal Gehenim, like the Mishnah says. If someone has a Sefer Torah of 85 letters, you're Matzil Mepnei HaDaleka. Okay. We have over here something remarkable. And that is, we've mentioned now, that in the Sefer Torah you have 7 Chumashim. 7 books. 7 books. Bereshis, Shemais, Vayikra. On the right side. On the left side you have Devarim, the end of Bamidbar, and Vayihi ben Saya. What is the middle branch of the Chumash then? From the beginning of Bamidbar until Vayihi ben Saya. Says the Ramah. Now the Ramah, we all know, of course, Ubnei Yisrael Yotzim B'yad Ramah. The Bnei Ashkenaz certainly follow the Ramah in all matters of halacha. The Ramah also wrote a sefer on philosophy. By the way, the Ramah wrote a parish on the Zayar, and he also wrote a sefer on philosophy, specifically Karbanos, called Torah Ha'olah. And in Torah Ha'olah, Chelek Aleph, Perek Yud Zayin, he writes something amazing. Says Ramah, Kvar Kosafti, I've already written, Sheshiva Hakonim Heim Shiva Svarim. The 7 branches of the menorah, right? We know the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash had how many branches? 7 branches. The 7 branches of the menorah in the Beis HaMikdash correspond to the 7 Svarim of the Torah. Sha'atar Mischalek Esaim. What is the middle branch? V'nira Shehakane Ha'emtzai, the middle branch of the Torah, whose Sefer Bamidbar Ad Vayihi ben Saya, is the beginning of Bamidbar until Vayihi ben Saya. Shehu Ha'emtzai b'Sefer Torah. Ushloisha Chumashim, the first 3 books, Shem Sefer Bereshis, Eila Shemais Vayikra, Mitzad Echad. On the right side you have Bereshis, Shemais, Vayikra. On the left side you have what? Vayihi ben Saya, and the portion after Vayihi ben Saya till the end of Bamidbar, Umishnah Torah Mitzad Sheni. Now we know the Torah is Eirech Yamim B'Yamina, Usamayla Oisha V'Kamash. The Torah has those who take the right path and those who take the left path. The Torah, the right path, are for those who serve Hashem completely lishma. They do everything perfectly. The left path are for those who need some ulterior motives. Says Ramah, listen to this. Gam kvar kasafti shahayu hakonim yaminu mismal lahoyros l'mashenemar oyrech yamim b'yamino smal oishav kavod. And the Gemara in Shabbos darshans oyrech yamim l'maminim ba. Yeah. The first 3 books of the Chumash talk about the Ma'aminim Ba. Hey Medabrim Mi Ma'yaminim Ba. Those who walk to the right side. Who? Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, Moshe, Aaron. The biggest tzaddikim in history. The people who served Hashem perfectly. The 3 first books of the Chumash speak about Klal Yisrael on the highest level. This represents the 3 right branches of the menorah. But you're going to ask, the 3 first books of the Chumash are those who served Hashem the perfect way. What about the Ched HaEgel? The Ched HaEgel. We were forgiven for the Ched HaEgel. It's no big deal. Look in the Kuzari. Kuzari says, if we would have made the ego, it would have been a big schus. We overestimate how bad the ego was. It's not as bad as we think. It really wasn't such a big deal. First of all, it's only a very small percent, right? 0.05% of Klal Yisrael. So it's a very small amount of Klal Yisrael. Serve the ego.
What about the question of Adam Rishon and the Mabul?
Adam Rishon.
And the Mabul also?
Yeah, those weren't too good. But in general, you know, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, The Klal Yisrael, yeah, thank you. Klal Yisrael, they were doing the right thing. They were on the right path. And they're forgiven. But the last 3 books, why? You have the spies, to the point where they kept on sinning. They all died in the desert. And what about Devarim? Devarim, it's all a big Musar shmooze for people, who need Musar. What about Vahi ben Saya? Yeah, Vahi ben Saya is also about Paranios. Yeah, according to the Chachamim, Vahi ben Saya is to separate between Paranos and Paranos. So says the Ramah, the Torah is like a menorah. Bereish Shmois Vayikra, those are for the Ma'iminim ba. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the Shvatim. The Masmi'ilim ba, you have Kairach, you have the Meraglim, you have Vahi ben Saya, you have Sefer Mishnah Torah. That's for those who are not doing the right thing. And Rabbi say, what is the middle branch of the menorah? The middle branch,
beginning of
Bamidbar until Vahi ben Saya. So perhaps this gives us a clue as to why Parshas Beha'aloscha speaks about the image of the menorah. Because this Parsha is actually the main amud of the menorah. If you, using this analogy, that the Sefer Torah is like a menorah, that would make our Parsha in the beginning the central branch of the menorah, and which the details of the central branch are given in the beginning of this Parsha. If you look at Rashi in Parshas Truma, the flower of the middle branch, that detail is given in this Parsha. Why this Parsha? This Parsha is the central branch of the menorah of the Torah. In fact, it's very interesting. Taking this analogy, how the Torah is compared to a menorah, the Vilna Gaon tells us how many psukim, how many words are in the first pasuk of Sefer Bereshis? 7. 7, says the Gra, corresponding to the 7 branches of the menorah. How many words are in the first pasuk of Shemais? Ve'ela Shemais b'nei Yisrael haba Mitzrayim es Yaakov ish u'beisai bo. 11. Why 11? Keneged the 11 kaftairim of the menorah. The 11 buttons of the menorah. The first pasuk of Vayikra. How many words in the first pasuk of Vayikra? 9 words, says the Gra, Keneged the 9 flowers. The first pasuk of Bamidbar. How many words? 17 words. We could always throw in 1 in Makailo, right? Never heard anyone? So altogether 18 Keneged, the 18 tfachim of the height of the menorah. And Devarim, how many words in the first pasuk of Devarim? 22 words Keneged, the 22 Givim, the 22 goblets of the menorah. So it's not just a far analogy. The Sefer Torah is literally compared to a menorah. All the various intricacies and details are alluded to in the very first pasuk of each of the 5 Chumashim. Okay.
How about the extra 2?
Good ha'ara. You had your Wheaties this morning, right? I don't know. We'll give you some homework. Okay. Rabbi say, listen to this. Says the Vilna Gaon, Moshe Rabbeinu had no problem with how to make the Aron, how to make the Shulchan. He had no problem with how to make the Mishkan until he came to the Menorah. He couldn't figure it out until Hashem said what? Fizeh Masa Menorah. Hashem showed him Menorah. Hashem showed him exactly what the menorah looked like. Ask the girl, what was the problem with the menorah? How is it any more intricate than the Aron, than the Shulchan? So you ready for this? How many goblets are on the menorah? So he said, 22 Gviyim. Can I get the 22 words in the first pasuk of Devarim? How many Kaftairim? 11. Can I get the first 11 words of Shemais? How many Prachim? 9. 9 Prachim. Can I get first pasuk of Vayikra? How many Kanim? 7. So what's 22 plus 11? 33. Plus 9? 42. Plus 7? 49. We know that the Gemara tells us in Masechta Rosh Hashanah. How many levels of understanding are there in Torah? 50 levels. Chamishim Shari Bina Ika. There are 50 levels of understanding. Bekulam Nitnu LaMoshe Chasar Achas. They are all given to Moshe Rabbeinu, missing one. Shenemar v'atechasreyu miyat me'alekim. Okay? That Moshe Rabbeinu was missing just a little bit from God. So there are 50 levels of wisdom. They're all given to Moshe except for one. Says the Gra. The menorah represents what? Torah. Right? Represents Chachma. Represents Torah. Haroitza lahachkim yajim. You want to be smart? Go to the south. V'simanech menorah shabadaran. The menorah represents Chachma. We find the light of the menorah is the light of Torah Shabbat Peh. We find in the Medrash that when a Tana said a good svara, the compliment was kaftor v'ferach. Buttons and flowers. Why? The menorah represented Chachma. Moshe Rabbeinu understood all Chachma, except for the 50th level of Chachma. The menorah has 22 geviyim, 22. 11 kaftayrim, 33. 9 prachim, 42. 7 kanim, 49. The menorah itself was the 50th level of wisdom, says the Gra. That 50th level of wisdom Moshe had no understanding of. When we say that Moshe couldn't comprehend the menorah, he knew how to make it. He didn't know what it represented because he had no concept of the Shar Nun, the 50th level of Chachma. Rabbi Sai, did Moshe Rabbeinu ever understand the 50th level of Chachma? Says the Arizal, yes. Says the Arizal. Why does the Gemara say, Kulam nitnu l'Moshe, chasar achas? They're all given to Moshe minus one. You know, that's like scratching your left ear with your right hand. They're all given except for one. Just say 49 were given. What do you mean they're all given except for one? You don't talk that way. Maybe in Chelm. You say they're all given except for one. Say 49 were given. Says Arizal, no, the Gemara is meduyak. They were all given, but then by the Chedo Egal, one was taken away. So in reality, Moshe, according to Arizal, knew all 50 levels of Chachma. And he says the remez is, the Shlach Kadosh brings us down, that Vayidaber Elikim es kol. Kol is 50. But then by the Chet HaEgal, Hashem said, Lech, raid. Lech is 50. Go down, raid from Lech. Go down from 50. Go down from 50. So Moshe Rabbeinu, according to Arizal, according to the Shlach, he had all 50 levels of Chachma. But it was taken away from him. One level was taken away from him, and that is why he could not comprehend the menorah. He didn't understand the 50th element of wisdom as alluded to in the menorah. Okay? You're right. Arizal also says on the last day of Moshe Rabbeinu's life, he was given the 50th level. How do we know that? Where did they bury him? On Har Navai. Nun Bai. Har Navai, the Arizal says, Nun Bai. He had the 50th level. Okay, we once spoke about this at greater length, but according to the Arizal, Moshe Rabbeinu had the 50th level of wisdom, and it was removed from him. How many oisiyos were in that 50th level of wisdom? We don't know. Let me ask you another question. The Gemara says Vayihi ben Saya is a sefer b'fnei atzmai. That's quite strange. It's only 2 psukim. Bereshis are hundreds of psukim, 1,000 psukim. Shemais 1,000 psukim. Vayikra 1,000 psukim. Vas epis, Vayihi ben Saya Arain, is 2 little measly psukim. Chas v'shem, 2 tiny little psukim. And it's a sefer b'fnei atzmai. Is he ready for this? Says the Chidah. Vayihi ben Saya Ha'araim. Look at number 15. Shar Hanun Nelam Moshe Rabbeinu Alav Shalom. The 50th level of wisdom was hidden from Moshe. Ulekach yesh nunim. That is why they're nunim. The Parshas Vayihi ben Saya. Lirmois lenun sharei bina, to allude to the 50th level of bina. The Sefer Vayihi ben Saya Gadol Kachal HaTorah. Originally, Vayihi ben Saya had an equal number of psukim to the entire Torah. And the only psukim we were zaycha to were 85 letters. Wow. You hear what the Chidah is saying? Originally, if we were able to look at the 2 psukim Vayihi ben Saya, it was so big, it was equal in number to the rest of the Sefer Torah. 300,000 oisiyos. But then what happened? Moshe Rabbeinu lost the Shar Nun, and here the Chidah doesn't explain how, but Moshe Rabbeinu lost the Shar Nun, and we were only Zaycha, that from those 300,000 letters that were on the Shar Nun, we only got 85 letters. Says the Chidah, in the Sefer Midbar Kedemos, this is in Ois Yud, Ma'areches Mareches Yud, Ois Vav, under the word Yisrael, says the Chida, now we have an answer to the 300,000 missing letters. You know what happened? Really, the Sefer Torah was 600,000 Ois. But, with the Chet HaEgel, most of the letters were taken away from Moshe Rabbeinu. And they're being hidden. Where are they hidden? In the Shar Nun, in the 50th level of wisdom that Moshe had, and it was removed from him. Okay? That is what the Chida says. In the Nachal Kidumim, and in the Midbar Kedemos. It's very interesting. So it comes out, Rabbi say, even though we're not allowed to say that one pasuk in Chumash is more or less important than another pasuk, but it comes out according to the Chida that the two psukim of Vayiv and Saya Arain are a little taste, a little me'ain of the 50th level of wisdom, which Moshe Rabbeinu lost, which is the highest level of wisdom, and we were zeicha to have a little taste of it. That is why, if you look at Rabbeinu Bechai writes wondrous things about these two psukim, because it comes out that of all the Torah, the only thing we have left from this 50th level of wisdom is these 85 letters.
So why is it upside down?
Okay, we'll see. Hopefully we'll explain. Okay. Rabbi say, how do we understand why at this juncture of time, in other words, had things worked out the way they should have, we would have gotten an additional 300,000 letters right here. It would have been in this interval, right, in these two psukim, and between these two nuns, we really should have had another 300,000 letters, an entire tremendous sefer, and we lost it. Why here? Why now? Why was it at this juncture we were about to get the highest level of Torah? How do we understand that? Right? You hear the question? It sounds like, almost, that this was the point in time when we were about to get an additional 300,000 letters, and, we lost it. We only were able to retain 85 letters. Why specifically at this time? So perhaps we could suggest something very interesting. We find that in this week's Parsha, Klal Yisrael begins to travel. Anybody know where they're going? Where are they going? Where they headed? They're going to go in the Midbar, Darban in the Midbar for 40 years?
In circles.
No, that wasn't the plan. They were about to go straight into Eretz Yisrael. Take a look in Parak Yud, Pasuk Chav Tes. Parak Yud, Pasuk Chav Tes. Vayomer Moshe l'chayvav ben Ruel Hamidyani chaysein Moshe noisim anachnu el hamakoim asher amar Hashem oisai yatein lachem. We're headed to the place. Says Rashi. Look at number 16. Miyad. We're going there immediately. Ad shloisha yamim anu nechnasim la'aretz. In 3 days we're going to enter the land. Shebimasa zeh harisha on this first trip. Nasu amanas li'kanas Eretz Yisrael. They were traveling on condition to enter Eretz Yisrael. In other words, they were not taking some circuitous route through the Midbar for 40 years. The plan was to enter Eretz Yisrael in 3 days. Ella, shachatu b'mesainanim. They sinned with the mesainanim. So in other words, if things would have gone as planned, in how many days would they have entered Eretz Yisrael? 3 days. Now if Moshe would have taken us into Eretz Yisrael, and he would have built the Beis HaMikdash, that's the end of history. Mashiach, Yemais HaMashiach, L'chai Olam Haba. That's it. Okay? So we were pretty close. That means, how many days were we away from, the ultimate tikkun, from the Achras Hayamim? We're 3 days away. People don't realize. You're reading the Chumash, we know at the end. We know the end of the story. We read it last year. But the end of the story didn't have to happen. We were almost there. We were 3 days away. We were so close. But it was even closer than you think. Because even though Klal Yisrael was 3 days away, the Arain was a lot closer.
It was already inside.
Look at number 17. Derech Shloishas Yamim. Look in Parak Yud, Pasuk Lamed Yom. Vayisu mehar Hashem derech shloshas yamim. They took a 3-day trip. Va'aroin bris Hashem noisei lefneim derech shloshas yamim. Says Rashi, they didn't travel for 3 days. They took a 3 days worth trip. B'yoyim echad in 1 day. Shahaya HaKadosh Baruch Hu chafetz lachnisam la'eretz miyad. Hashem has such a taiva to bring us into Eretz Yisrael that the 3-day trip we did in 1 day. So if we were to ask, how close were we to the ultimate tikkun? 1 split second. We were at the Yarden. We were ready to go in. In other words, we weren't 3 days away. We were right there. The Aron, Bris Hashem Noisel named the Aron went ahead. What was in the Aron? The Shivrei Luchos. It went 3 days ahead of them. And Moshe Rabbeinu davened, Kuma Hashem! What did Moshe Rabbeinu say? Stop, wait for us. Don't go any further. So if we were to ask, at what point in history were we closest to the Achros Hayamim? You'd have to say it's in this week's Parsha, when Bnei Yisrael had one step on the other side of the Yarden, and they're about to go in. But we lost out. In other words, had we merited to go into Eretz Yisrael and built Beis HaMikdash and had the Yimais HaMashiach, we would have been Zoicha to the Shar Nun, to the ultimate tikkun, to the highest level of wisdom. But since we were so close and we were right there, Chutz, we had a taste. We had a small taste of it. What was the taste? The taste was Vayhi ben Saya ha'arayin vayayim Moshe Kuma Hashem. In other words, these 85 letters were the closest we ever came to attaining the ultimate tikkun. In other words, what we were asking was, why was it that at this juncture in time we were going to get all the additional 300,000 letters, and at least we got this amount? The answer is this was the closest we ever came to going into Eretz Yisrael led by Moshe Rabbeinu. We were at the brink, we were at the border. And Hashem said, you know what? Now's not the time. They sinned with the Messiah. Perhaps they were Ma'orer, again, the Chet Ha'egel, which was the Ma'akiv of the Shar Nun. However we understand that. But this was the closest time in history we ever came to the Tikkun Haggadah. Rabbi say, with this, the Mefarshim answer a very interesting question. In Sefer Yeshaya, look at number 21. The Pasuk says, in Parak Nun Aleph, Pasuk Daled, Ki Torah me'iti teitze. A Torah will come forth from me. What does the word teitze mean? Ki mitzi ayin. Right? What does the word teitze mean? It's not
Go out. Emanate.
emanate.
Come out.
Did emanate? Does emanate? Or will emanate? Will emanate.
Will.
Torah me'iti. A Torah will emanate. What do you mean a Torah will emanate? The Torah has already emanated from Hashem. Hashem misinai ba. Hashem already gave us the Torah. What do you mean a Torah will emanate from Hashem? The Medrash is even more explicit. It says the Medrash in Vayikra Rabba Shmini Yud Gimel Gimel Amar Rabbi Avin Bar Kahana Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu Torah Chadasha Me'iti Teitze. A new Torah will come forth. Chidush Torah Me'iti Teitze. A new Torah? Ask the Chassam Sofer. This is so difficult. It's even apikarsus. Chassam Sofer says that the simple meaning of this medrash is keneged one of the Yud Gimel Ikrei Ha'amuna, that Torah zu loy tehei mochlefes v'loy tehei Torah acheres me'es habar yisrael shema. So what does the medrash mean? A new Torah will come forth. The Torah was already given. Nothing will be added. Nothing will be taken away. So what is the medrash? Is a medrash sasam. Says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz. Okay, just put on the Marmar comments this morning. Look at number 23. Says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz. We know that one of the reasons why Klal Yisrael were punished in this week's Parsha, one of the Peranios, is because they ran away from Har Sinai. Why did they run away from Har Sinai? They didn't want to get more Torah. More Torah? I thought they got the whole Torah. No. They didn't get what? The missing 300,000 letters. Of what level is that Torah? That's the Shar Nun. That's the 50th level. So Klal Yisrael ran away from Har Sinai because they didn't want to get the 50th level. Says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, when the Medrash tells us that in the future Hashem is going to give us a Torah Chadasha, it's not a new Torah. This Torah was already created. It was already given to Moshe. Moshe knew it. Moshe knew it when the Torah was given. Moshe knew it on his last day. According to other shurim we spoke out, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai knew it, Rabbi Akiva knew it. This is not a new Torah. This is an old Torah that we didn't want at that time. That's what the Medrash means, says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz. Torah chadasha me'iti teitze. At what juncture in time were we supposed to have gotten the Torah? Vayihi ben Tzaya ha'arayin vayemer Moshe. How much of it did we get? 85 letters. But the rest of the Shar Nun, we said, we're not interested. We turned it upside down. Says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, the two psukim of Vayihi ben Tzaya ha'arayin. are surrounded by a nun in the front, a nun behind, to show that this chelek of Torah is from the Shar Nun, but most of it we were mahapech al panav. Most of it we didn't accept. Most of it we rejected. Says Rabbi Yonasan Eibishitz in the Tfaras Yonasan on this week's Parsha. He says, on the fourth line, Torah's Hashem tamima ushlema. Hashem's Torah is complete and whole. Ein lahaisif. You can't add. Rak shechardu klal we're afraid sheyitin lahem Torah chadasha. That Hashem would give them the new Torah. What is that? The inyan Torah chadasha. The concept of this Torah chadasha. Ki mem tesh sharibina niglu l'Moshe. 49 levels were revealed to Moshe. V'zehu Torah seinu. That's our Torah right now. B'Torah chadasha hu shar chamishim. B'zehu yachasaras. That's what they were missing. V'heim loy bikshu. They didn't want it. Umasu b'shar chamishim. They rejected the 50th gate. Lekach ba simin nun haflucha. That is why the nun was written upside down. Rabbi say, we were mavakesh from the Ribbanu Shalom. What is the bakasha? We say to Ribbanu Shalom, Yishakeni min ashikos pihu. Kiss us from the kisses of your mouth. What's that talking about? What are we asking Hashem? You look at Rashi on Shir Hashirim. Rashi on Shir Hashirim says like this: God already spoke to us one time. Peh el peh. That's when He gave us the Torah in Har Sinai. But, says Rashi, there is going to be another occasion in history where the Ribbon Shalom is going to come, be Megala Himself to Klal Yisrael, and teach us a dimension of Torah that He never taught us. Okay, so what we're saying now is Rashi on Shir Hashem. What dimension? Says Rashi, the Sisrei HaTorah, the secrets of the Torah. That's what we're calling the Shar Nun. And that's what we're Mavakesh from Hashem. We say, Hashem, you already spoke to us once. Peh el peh. Peh is 85, by the way. We want you to speak to us again. Peh el peh. That's what we ask. Yishakeni minashikais pihu. That's why Sefer Rus, which is the creation of the fruition of David HaMelech and the Yemais HaMashiach, has how many psukim? Pehei psukim in Sefer Rus. So that's the bakasha we have to Ribbon Shalom. Right now we're only zoicha to 2 psukim, to 85 oisiyos. And we're mavakesh from the Ribbon Shalom, Yishakeni minashikais pihu. We should be zoicha to see Torah chadasha me'itei teitzei. Have a wonderful day.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.